She told me she loved the place. Said it reminded her of Chicago, back when we still had dreams instead of routines. So I made the reservation 2 weeks in advance, corner booth, same steakhouse where we used to argue over desserts we'd pretend not to finish. I shaved, pressed the shirt she once said brought out my eyes, wore that clunky silver watch she gave me on our 10th, the one she stopped noticing somewhere around our 15th. Still ticks even if we don't. At the table, she picked at her food like a bored cat with a dead mouse. Didn't comment on the wine, even though I got the exact year she loved. The bottle from that Napa trip we took before her sister's divorce made her reevaluate everything. The waiter came and went. I did most of the talking, but not in a needy way, just trying to steer the ship before it hit another rock. I even made a dumb toast, something about endurance and laughter, and she raised her glass like she was at a corporate dinner. She smiled for a picture I asked the waiter to take. Thin, brittle, like stretched-out plastic wrap. Then came dessert. Crème brûlée. Her favorite used to be anyway. She just looked at it. And then it happened. She reached for her phone mid-bite. I thought she was going to snap a photo, maybe post something fake happy for her Facebook church group. Instead, she stood, took one last sip of her wine, dabbed her mouth with the napkin, and said, "I'm heading out for some fun." I blinked. Now? She didn't even flinch. Just slid her clutch under her arm like she was late to a spa appointment. Her voice was cool, surgical. "If you try to stop me, I'll call the cops." No raised voice, no emotion, just protocol, like she'd rehearsed it. Took me a few seconds to process the words. Long enough for her to look annoyed that I was still sitting there, stunned like a deer in the middle of a quiet country road. She didn't explain, didn't say where or with whom. Just fun. And the threat. The threat landed harder than the announcement. I don't know what cracked first, my pride or my reality. I watched her walk out in those heels I bought for her last birthday. She didn't say thank you for dinner, didn't ask if I needed a ride home, just vanished into the cold spring air like a ghost that had stuck around too long. I sat there a few minutes longer. The waiter came back to ask if everything was all right, and I almost laughed. I mean, how do you answer that? She's gone. But at least the steak was medium rare? I signed the check, tipped big, felt like a funeral. On the drive home, the silence felt weaponized. Like the car knew, the road knew, even the damn streetlights flickering over my windshield knew. This wasn't just a bad night. She was gone. Not just physically. She had already left long before that dinner. I was just the fool lighting candles at a grave. At home, I saw the flowers I'd arranged. White roses. The same she carried on our wedding day. They were still fresh. Still smelled like hope. I set the leftovers on the counter and sat down in my recliner. No music. No TV. Just the hum of the fridge. The click of that old watch still ticking away on my wrist like it didn't get the memo. I stared at the front door for a while, waiting for nothing. She didn't come back. Not that night. But something else did. Something I hadn't felt in years. A pulse under the skin. Not rage. Not despair. Something colder. Clarity. She didn't call. Not at first. And I sure as hell didn't either. I sat there in that recliner. Same one I bought after my second back surgery. Sinking into the leather like it might absorb the sting of what just happened. The house had that eerie post-holiday quiet. Like when the guests leave and you're left with crumbs and cigarette smells no one admits to. Only it wasn't a holiday. It was our 20th anniversary. A milestone. One she pissed on with 5 words and a clutch bag. The fridge hummed like it was mocking me. The ice maker clinked. I stared at the front door like it might apologize. Didn't. Nothing did. I leaned back, crossed my arms, uncrossed them, looked at my hands. They looked old. Not in a tragic way, just tired. Spent. These were hands that rebuilt our deck after the storm in '09, that caught our daughter when she was born early, that rubbed her shoulders while she cried about her mom dying, back when we still touched without flinching. I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, past the roses. They still looked perfect, still smelled like lies. That's when I opened the drawer. The one she always called my junk drawer. Full of pens that don't work and receipts for tools I never returned. Buried beneath the manuals and rubber bands was a yellow legal pad. The kind I used back when we were broke and every dollar had a name. I grabbed a pen. It didn't work. Of course. Second one did. I sat back down, notepad in my lap. Wrote the first word without even thinking. Bank accounts. Not just the ones we shared. Those were nearly bled dry ever since she started managing things. I meant the old savings account I kept from my first job at the paper mill. She didn't even know it still existed. I hadn't touched it in a decade. But it was time. Next line. Lawyer's number. I hadn't spoken to Carl in years. Not since I helped him rewire his garage and he said, "You ever need out, you call me." No judgment. I always thought that was dramatic. Maybe he knew something I didn't. Next. The lockbox in the garage. My hand hovered over that one. The lockbox. The thing I hadn't thought about in years. A buddy of mine, divorced twice and proud of it, told me to keep a box, just in case. Not for revenge. For leverage. I laughed it off. Still bought it, though. Filled it with bits and pieces I thought might never matter. Receipts. Copies of tax returns. Photos I wasn't supposed to have. Hell, I even tossed in a flash drive labeled insurance out of pure paranoia. Guess I was smarter than I looked. I kept writing. Contact payroll. Make sure my check goes to the old account. Call the credit union, freeze joint cards. Find the cabin listing, the one by Lake Superior I saved months ago. Cancel anniversary trip. She'd forgotten anyway. My jaw clenched. I didn't even realize it until my molars started to ache. This wasn't grief. Not the loud, snotty kind people expect. It was quiet, mechanical, like something inside me had finally snapped back into alignment. She thought I'd yell. Thought I'd follow her. Beg. Plead. Unravel. Maybe that's how it worked in her sister's marriage. Maybe that's what her little yoga group whispers about in wine-drunk therapy sessions. But I'm not one of her projects. I'm not some barefoot retiree waiting on forgiveness. I'm a man who just realized he's been living with a ghost in lipstick. She didn't see me writing that list. Didn't see the shift. But I did. And once it started, I couldn't stop. Pages turned. The pen moved. The plan, because that's what it was now, took shape. This wasn't about making her pay. It wasn't even about making her understand. It was about closing a door without slamming it. It was about choosing silence over spectacle. Because the scariest man in the room isn't the one yelling. It's the one making a list. The key was still taped behind the rake. Same place I'd stuck it 5 years ago after Jerry, my buddy from the plant, half drunk off bourbon and bitterness, jabbed a finger at me one night and said, "You trust her too much. Keep records. Not for now, for if." I'd laughed, called him paranoid. He said, "Every man's happy until he ain't." Then he handed me a lockbox from his truck and said, "Take it. Humor me." I did. Tossed it on a shelf in the garage next to paint cans and broken Christmas lights. Never thought I'd need it. But here I was, kneeling on cold concrete at 11 p.m., brushing dust off a box that might as well have had Pandora stamped across it. The lock clicked open too easily, like it had been waiting. Inside, it was all there. The crap I'd forgotten I even bothered to collect. Bank statements. Old ones. Back when we still had joint accounts and she wasn't handling all the online stuff because you always forget passwords. I printed them out anyway, mostly to feel useful. But now the red circles I'd drawn on a few pages caught my eye. ATM withdrawals from a city 2 hours away. Always on Wednesdays. Always between 2 and 4 p.m. I thought she was at her volunteer gig. She said she was working with the church food drive. Then came the credit card receipt. Folded neatly, dated 18 months ago. A Marriott stay. One night. Single king bed. Signed with her initials. I remember that night because she came home, exhausted from helping her cousin move. She brought home takeout to sell the story. And then, the screenshot. A text I wasn't supposed to see. One of those preview bubbles that popped up on her lock screen while her phone was charging in the kitchen. It said, "He's clueless. I'll be back by 1. I don't remember the name. Just that gut punch. The silence that followed. The way I smiled and asked if she needed help with the dishes. Like I hadn't just had a knife dragged across my ribs. I didn't confront her then. I screenshotted it using my old work phone, backed it up, and emailed it to myself. Never opened it again until now. I copied everything to the USB I'd labeled insurance. Felt stupid back then. Like one of those spy movie things divorced men joke about. But as I watched the files transfer, Slowly, methodically, as if even the computer knew this was sacred. I didn't feel stupid. I felt ready. This wasn't revenge porn. Wasn't gotcha material for court or threats. I wasn't that guy. I didn't want to hurt her. Didn't want to torch what was left. I just wanted the truth in my hands. I wanted to know I hadn't imagined the years of distance, the sudden coldness, the vague excuses, the perfume that didn't match her usual brand, the shower before dinner, the phone she always kept screen down. Everything I'd buried was in that box. Not just paper certainty. And it didn't scream. It whispered. Confirmed what my gut had already accepted hours ago at that steakhouse. She'd left me long before she walked out that door. But I was done bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts. Done wondering if I was too sensitive, too suspicious, too insecure. Her favorite word to throw around when I asked questions that got too close to the truth. The USB clicked out of the port. I held it in my hand. No grand ceremony. No speech. Just slipped it into the pocket of my jacket like it was a receipt from the gas station. I closed the box. Locked it again. Not out of sentiment, but because it was habit now, like locking up your tools after you've finished a job. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel angry. I felt like a man who's done waiting to be proved right. I set the alarm for 4 a.m. Not because I needed that much time, but because I wanted the silence. The kind of silence you can only get when the world's still sleeping and hasn't yet remembered how cruel it can be. No crying, no yelling, no slammed doors. Just dark skies, tired headlights, and the decision to stop bleeding out over someone who wouldn't even hand you a napkin. I didn't pack much. I knew exactly what I needed. Couple of shirts, socks, razor, the good flashlight, my birth certificate, the USB-labeled insurance, and my granddad's old buck knife. Not because I feared danger, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to carry something that meant something. I didn't take the photo albums. Not one. Not the one from our trip to Oregon. Not the one from her cousin's wedding where she made me dance barefoot in the grass. Those were hers now. Let them rot in the attic. I wasn't interested in souvenirs from a museum I no longer visited. She was still out wherever fun had taken her. Maybe still laughing. Maybe already regretting. Maybe passed out in someone else's sheets. Didn't matter. The point wasn't where she was. It was where I no longer had to be. I stood in the kitchen a while, everything packed, truck keys in hand. The only light came from above the stove. Soft, yellow, familiar. I slipped off my wedding band and placed it on the counter next to the salt shaker. Not in the drawer, not tucked away like something sacred. Right there where she'd see it. Simple. Final. Punctuation mark. The ring left a faint indent on my finger. That ghost circle that says, "Someone used to matter here." I looked at it once, then never again. The dog was long gone. Past 2 winters ago. The kids were grown. One in Tampa, one in Denver. No need to explain. I wasn't leaving anyone behind. Just illusions. I double-checked the lockbox. Still hidden behind the rake. Sealed. Untouched. I didn't need to take it with me. The USB was enough for now. I locked the door behind me with the same key I'd used for 2 decades. Slid it into my pocket. Not because I'd be back, but because leaving it behind felt too theatrical. I'm not a man for gestures. I'm a man for movement. The truck started on the first try, engine grumbling like an old friend woken up too early. I let it idle, watching the frost cling to the windshield edges like cobwebs. No radio. No heater. Just breath on glass and a road that didn't know me yet. No destination in the GPS. I didn't need one. I'd already made the most important turn. Away. As I pulled onto the highway, the first light of dawn was cracking through the tree line. Blue and pink, gentle and undeserved. Funny how peace doesn't come when you beg for it. It shows up when you finally stop arguing with the storm. I wasn't running. I was choosing my battlefield. And she'd never see it coming. The motel was nothing special, just off Route 41, wedged between a shuttered diner and a bait shop that hadn't sold live worms since Clinton was president. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but the bed was clean and the lock clicked solid. That was enough. I set the duffel down and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the cheap landscape painting bolted to the wall. Somewhere in the background, a fake river flowed through fake trees toward a fake future. At 8:03 a.m., my phone started vibrating. I hadn't even checked it since I left. Didn't want to. But the sound, it was relentless. Like a wasp trapped in a jar. I finally picked it up. The lock screen was just a wall of red. 156 missed calls. Every one of them from her. A few were just rings. Some came with voicemails. Others had transcriptions. Garbled, full of half-finished words and cracked breath. I opened the first one out of morbid curiosity. Where are you? Are you serious right now? You just left? What the hell is wrong with you? Pick up. Pick up. I let it play. Didn't react. Didn't blink. Second one. Okay. Okay, I was drinking, alright? I just wanted a night for me. You didn't have to disappear. Call me. Please. Let's just talk. That one had slurred edges. Like a bottle was still in her hand. The faux vulnerability in her voice. Like she was trying on sorrow to see if it still fit. Third one. You think you're some kind of martyr now? Walking out like a child? I should have known you'd do something dramatic. You always play the victim. You left me. I powered off the phone. Not out of anger. Not even relief. Just stillness. Her panic was loud. Desperate. Scrambling for control the way someone reaches for a falling glass. But I was already on the floor, already swept up the pieces. She hadn't noticed I'd stopped bleeding weeks ago. I drove into town. Found a strip mall. Walked into a big box store with fluorescent lights and aisles that smelled like dust and plastic. Bought a prepaid phone. Nothing fancy. No data plan. Just talk and text in case I needed to call Carl the lawyer or Jerry with the backup garage. When the cashier asked if I wanted to transfer contacts, I shook my head. Nope. Clean slate. He nodded, didn't ask questions. Probably sees guys like me all the time. Eyes too clear for morning, wedding ring-shaped dents on their fingers. I sat in the parking lot after, opening the new phone like it was a fresh set of lungs. Entered one number, Carl's. That was it. The old phone? I opened the glove compartment and dropped it in like a spent shell casing. Let her scream into the void. Let her wonder why silence cuts deeper than any word she ever spat at me. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't strategy. It was oxygen. Her voice couldn't reach me anymore. And that was the beginning of real peace. The post office was nearly empty. Just a kid with purple hair shipping something overnight and a tired woman behind the counter who looked like she'd been scanning barcodes since Nixon resigned. Perfect. No small talk. No questions. I stood at the self-service kiosk, holding the padded envelope like it was radioactive. It didn't weigh much, paper and plastic don't. But meaning? That thing could have sunk a boat. Inside, 3 printed credit card statements. The ones with late-night charges she never explained. Uber rides from strange neighborhoods. Dinners for 2 at places I'd never been invited. The Marriott receipt. Folded once, tucked behind the statements. Her initials. Her signature. The timestamp. The lie. And one note. No threats. No lectures. Just 6 words. Scrawled in my handwriting on a plain sheet of printer paper. You made your choice. Now live with it. No name. No return address. Not even a hint of where it came from. But she'd know. Oh, she'd know. Because there's a specific kind of silence that only comes from someone who used to beg, and now doesn't even speak. It hits different. It rattles the bones. I slid the envelope into the drop bin. The thunk was oddly satisfying. No one clapped. No thunder cracked. Just a quiet metal sound. Like a coffin being closed politely. She expected a blowout. A showdown. Maybe a scene at the house where I'd be the red-faced fool shouting, "How could you?" While she played calm and rational for the neighbors. She thought I'd chase, argue, unravel. But what she got was paperwork. Proof. An absence. I imagined her opening that package. Sitting on the edge of the bed in her sweats. Maybe still smelling of someone else's cologne. Flipping through pages she couldn't lie to. Her fingers trembling, trying to call a number that no longer worked. Realizing the trap wasn't in confrontation, but in the lack of one. Because that's what she feared most. Not my rage. My indifference. The note wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. Cold. Undeniable. You made your choice. Now live with it. She could twist that in her mind however she liked. Maybe call it petty. Maybe call it cruel. But deep down, under all the excuses and Chardonnay-fueled justifications, she'd know. This was math. Choices equal consequences. And for once, I wasn't cleaning up her mess. I got in the truck, started the engine, and didn't look back. She strutted into the diner like she still owned the narrative. Hair curled, sunglasses too big for a cloudy day. That same high-strung energy she used to save for PTA meetings and holiday drama. The kind of energy that says, I know I'm being watched, and I want to be. And watched she was. Old Frank saw her first. He was nursing his morning black coffee near the jukebox like always. He didn't nod, didn't wave. Just blinked once and kept staring at the wall behind her. Jimmy was behind the counter, drying the same mug for the third time. Mary, the waitress who'd been working there since before Wi-Fi, slipped into the kitchen like she had somewhere better to be. Everyone knew. Hell, the toast knew. Is he here? She asked loud enough to cut through the Elvis playing low on the speakers. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Who? She scoffed. Don't play dumb. You know who. He shrugged. Haven't seen him in weeks. That part was true. I hadn't been back since the night I packed the duffel. Not once. But it wasn't just absence, it was premeditated. I called Jimmy the morning I left. Told him I might go dark for a while. Said I needed quiet, no drama, no messages passed. And he, God bless him, just said, got it, brother. And that was that. Now here she was, standing in the place she always hated. Smells like fried grease and man sweat. She used to say, wearing Chanel like armor, trying to claw back what she thought was still hers. What do you mean you haven't seen him? Her voice cracked right on scene. A little too high, a little too brittle. Jimmy set the mug down and leaned forward. Calm, patient. The way you'd talk to someone about to walk into traffic. Exactly what I said. He ain't been around. But he always comes here. Tuesdays and Thursdays. You guys play cards. You talk about that stupid boat he never finishes. Jimmy didn't flinch. Guess plans change. The silence that followed was thicker than the gravy. Her heels clacked once on the tile as she shifted, looking for support in the room and finding none. Frank didn't look up. Mary didn't come back out. Nobody smiled. Not at her. She wasn't just unwelcome. She was irrelevant. She huffed. Loud, performative. Then turned on those heels and stormed out like a daytime soap character whose scene had been cut. The bell over the door jingled, sharp and final. Jimmy finally looked up. Ha! He said it to no one in particular. Just a man resetting the counter. That was the thing about her. She thought the diner was just a greasy pit stop for old men with no imagination. But for us, it was the war room, the chapel, the place you go when your world is too loud and you need voices that still speak plain. She came looking for a man who used to sit in that booth every Tuesday with a thermos of black coffee and a worn-out laugh. But that man didn't exist anymore. He'd packed up his silence, left his ring on the counter, and took his dignity to a better table, one where she'd never be seated. And the best part? She couldn't even get the address. The voicemail came in just after noon, during a quiet moment parked by the lake. I'd picked up a sandwich from a corner gas station, and was halfway through chewing a mouthful of rubbery turkey when the phone buzzed. Unknown number. No voicemail transcript. I almost didn't listen, almost just deleted it out of habit. But something in my gut said play it. So I did. Hey man, it's Danny. Look, I should have said something. I knew she was sneaking around. Not everything, but enough to know it wasn't right. I thought she'd stop. Or maybe I didn't want to believe it either. But it's been eating at me. I'm sorry, man. You didn't deserve that. I should have told you. He sighed. There was a long pause. Then, take care of yourself. Click. No groveling. No explanation for the months, years maybe, that he sat across from me at barbecues and birthday dinners and never said a damn word. Just guilt and an overdue whisper of truth. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering over call back. But I didn't. I hit delete. Not out of spite. Not out of pride. Because I already knew. Not just about her cheating. I'd known that in my bones long before I ever found the receipt, before she slid into that steakhouse booth and shattered 2 decades in 5 syllables. I knew people like Danny. The good guys who keep their heads down and tell themselves they're not choosing sides, all while silently choosing hers. The ones who think saying, I didn't know what to do erases the fact they did nothing. And I wasn't going to be their confessional. He wasn't the first to fail me. He probably wouldn't be the last. But I didn't need his apology to validate what I'd already accepted. This wasn't just a betrayal between two people. It was a rot that had crept into the whole damn structure. She'd poisoned the well, and everyone close enough to sip from it either drank willingly, or looked away when it turned black. Still, it stung. Not the content of the message. There was no shock left in me, but the familiarity of that voice. Danny was the one who helped me build the porch swing for our daughter's graduation. The guy who brought me a six-pack the day my dad died. He once called me the brother he never had. And yet, when his actual sister started sneaking around, he decided silence was the kindest thing. I leaned back in the truck seat, let the sun warm my face, finished the sandwich like it didn't taste like dust now. The wind rustled the trees, the lake lapped quietly against the rocks, and for a moment, I just existed. Alone but not hollow. That was the thing about betrayal. It doesn't scream. It seeps. It whispers. And when it's finally exposed, it doesn't ask for a fight. It just leaves you with a choice. Cling to the wreckage, or step off the boat. I chose dry land. Danny's guilt? Not my burden. Her mistakes? No longer my orbit. I sat there with the windows cracked, eyes closed, letting the stillness settle in my chest like sediment. No rage, no sadness, just a strange, hard-earned peace. Her world was unraveling. Mine was just beginning to breathe. I called the realtor the same day I got Danny's voicemail. Didn't hesitate. Didn't run it through some moral filter. Just pulled over into a gas station lot, found Linda's number in my old work contacts, and said, "It's time." She remembered me right away. The place with the wraparound porch and the rhododendrons out front, right? Beautiful bones. You ready to let go? I looked out the windshield, saw the same truck I'd been driving for 12 years, the same cracked dashboard, the same scars on my knuckles from years of fixing things nobody thanked me for. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." Within 48 hours, photos were taken, the place was cleaned, and the listing went live. The market was still hot. Retirees and remote workers wanted their slice of quiet. Offers poured in faster than I expected. Full price. Cash. No contingencies. She didn't even know it was happening. Because the deed had my name on it, and after 20 years of trusting her with everything, I'd finally trusted myself with one thing. Control. The house sold in 4 days. My share wired straight to a new account under my full name. No joint, no cosign, just mine. From there, I wired half of it to an old contact up north. He had a cabin near Lake Vermilion. Had been trying to unload it since his divorce last year. A-frame, fireplace, thick trees that kept out the world. Not fancy, but honest. A place where nothing pretended to be something it wasn't. By the time she realized what was happening, I was already watching loons drift across the water. A mug of bitter coffee warming my hands. My old mutt's collar swinging from a hook by the door. No phone service. No TV. Just static and stillness and a long overdue sigh of relief. But she didn't know any of that. What she did know was that she pulled up to the house she'd once ruled like a bored queen, to find the windows bare, the mailbox empty, the porch stripped of furniture, and the for sale sign gone. The realtor ignored her calls. I'd warned Linda. She'll show up. She'll act like she's entitled to answers. You don't owe her a second of your breath. Linda agreed. Said she'd dealt with her kind before. Looks for sympathy while still holding the knife. She called me, of course. Not the new number. I hadn't been that careless. She left 3 messages on the old one still stuffed in the glove box. "What the hell did you do? You don't get to sell our home without telling me. You coward. At least face me like a man." Each one angrier than the last. Her fury climbing the walls of her own delusion like a cat trapped in a shrinking room. She didn't understand, couldn't fathom, that the life she took for granted had packed up and evicted itself. The pantry she filled with her detox teas was bare. The closet where she once hid overpriced handbags was hollow. The bathroom mirror that watched her lies grow bolder now only reflected nothing. I imagined her standing there on the front lawn, hand on her hip, still clinging to that misplaced confidence that she could barge in, charm her way through it, reset the script. But there was no one left to perform for. No audience. No stage. Just a cold, sold house that didn't belong to her anymore, and never really had. She wanted confrontation. She wanted the big finale, the tearful argument, The apology she'd pretend to mean. The maybe we can still work it out. She'd dangle like bait on a rusted hook. But I didn't bite. I'd already built a new hearth. One with real heat, not just flickering candles masking cold intentions. She had nowhere to scream but the driveway. And even the wind had better things to listen to. I found Larry's number scrawled in an old tackle box, half faded from sun and time. Hadn't talked to him in years. Not since her voice got sharp every time I mentioned his name. "That man's a fossil," she'd say. Crude, loud, probably hasn't paid taxes in a decade. Which honestly only made me like him more. Back when we were younger and less deluded, Larry and I used to fish the same muddy stretch of river every other Sunday. We didn't always catch much, but God, we talked. Or sometimes didn't. Just sat there with beer and bait, listening to water and lies float by. So I called him. He answered like he'd been waiting since 2012. "Well, damn. Thought you were dead or converted to yoga." "Neither," I said. "You free tonight?" He didn't hesitate. "Pick the place. I'll bring the indigestion." We met at a roadside bar outside town. Grease-stained menus, neon beer signs, and tables with carved initials from people who loved harder than they lasted. My kind of place. Larry was already there when I arrived, seated with 2 burgers, 2 beers, and a grin that said he'd seen too much and regretted too little. "Still got that limp?" he asked, nodding at my gait. "Still got that mouth?" I shot back, and just like that, we were us again. We didn't talk about her. Not once. Not even in passing. Not because she didn't warrant a footnote, but because the chapter was closed, and Larry was the kind of man who didn't reread bad books. Instead, we talked about everything else. How the fish used to bite better in '98. How his nephew wrecked his Harley trying to impress a girl who ran off with his cousin. How my daughter once peed off the dock because that's what nature's for. And we agreed she was right. The waitress brought another round without us asking. The jukebox played a song we couldn't name but both knew by heart. Larry leaned back in his chair, that trademark squint in his eyes, and said, "You look lighter." I didn't answer, just took a sip of my beer and let the silence finish the sentence. The truth was, I hadn't realized how heavy I'd been until the weight started falling off. Years of filtering my words, dulling my edges, making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. It was all gone. And now I could stretch again. Laugh without a second glance. Eat a damn cheeseburger without someone scanning the calorie count out loud. Larry and I stayed there until the sky turned that bruised purple you only get in springtime. No plans. No pressure. Just the kind of night men have when no one is performing for anyone anymore. As we stood to leave, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing all right, brother." "I'm getting there." He nodded. "Just don't get soft. The lake won't fish itself." I promised I wouldn't. I got in my truck, turned the key, and sat for a moment as the engine rumbled to life. No missed calls, no texts, no reminders, just the hum of the road and a belly full of cheap meat and truth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full. It showed up on a Sunday morning. I was drinking coffee from a chipped mug in the cabin, wrapped in flannel and silence, scrolling through the community forum for the nearest town. A habit I'd picked up just to feel a little tethered to civilization. Lost dogs, garage sales, somebody asking if anyone knew a good septic guy. Then there it was. No username I recognized. No profile picture. Just a long post titled, "What do you do when you realize you're the villain?" I almost kept scrolling, but the first line stopped me cold. I threw away a man who would have walked through fire for me. And I knew, without needing names, dates, or details, I knew it was her. He planned things I didn't appreciate, gave me years I didn't deserve. I cheated because I was bored. I lied because it was easier. And when he left without a word, I expected him to crawl back. But he never did. I don't know where he is. He doesn't answer. I don't think he even hates me. That's the worst part, he's just gone. I still sleep on one side of the bed, still set 2 plates. I keep checking the door like he might come back and say something. Anything. But he won't. He's not lost. I am. It went on longer than it needed to. She used words like grief and epiphany and forgiveness, as if wrapping the mess in poetry could mop up the stain. I read every word once, slowly, carefully, then I clicked away. Not because it hurt, But because it didn't stir rage. It didn't scratch old wounds. It felt like reading a stranger's confession in a newspaper left at a diner. Vaguely tragic, mostly self-serving. An apology written not to be heard, but to be seen. She wasn't looking for me. She was looking for absolution. For anyone to comment, "You're so brave. He'll forgive you. People make mistakes." But I wasn't in that audience. I was 2 counties and a lifetime away. And her post, her prose, her public performance, it wasn't a bridge. It was a gravestone. A polished little headstone for a marriage she murdered with casual hands and now mourned with performative tears. I closed the browser. Went outside. The lake was still. Birds moved without sound between the trees. My breath fogged in the air, clean and unburdened. I split a few logs, built a fire, and let it crackle. She'd finally said sorry. And I let the wind take it. The table was by the window. Not the kind of window you get at a fancy place with candlelight and menus that use too many vowels. This was the kind of place where the pane had a smudge no one cleaned because it didn't matter. Where the view was trees, a sliver of lake, and a dirt parking lot where every truck had seen more years than it should have. I called ahead. Something about making the choice to plan a dinner, just for me, felt important. Ritualistic, even. Like marking the end of a war with a quiet flag raising. No drama. Just dignity. The server came by, young kid, probably 20, polite in that soft, small-town way that isn't forced. "Just you tonight?" I nodded, smiled. "Yeah, just me." He didn't blink. Didn't give that awkward half-pity look people give when they see a man eating alone. Just jotted it down and asked how I wanted the steak. I said medium rare, and he gave a thumbs up like we just agreed on a solid life principle. Whiskey, neat. No ice. No fruit. I leaned back and looked around the diner. 2 old guys arguing over a crossword. A teenage couple awkwardly pretending they weren't watching each other chew. A woman with a toddler half asleep in her lap. And me. But I didn't feel alone. I felt present. The food came fast. The steak was good, nothing transcendent, but honest. The kind of meal that tastes better because you earned it. Each bite grounded. Each sip of whiskey cutting clean and warm. I didn't think about her. Not in the way I used to, anyway. There was no spiral, no aching reel of what if, and how did it come to this. That tape had burned out weeks ago. What was left now was space. Real, open space I hadn't had in years. Emotional square footage she used to fill with sighs and suspicion. I remembered how I used to order for 2 even when I dined alone. Habit, maybe, or some hopeful delusion that she'd show up later. Now I ordered for 1, and it didn't feel like a subtraction. Felt like subtraction done right. I finished the meal, paid cash, left a generous tip. Not because I had anything to prove, but because kindness doesn't cost pride, it affirms it. As I stood to leave, the server passed by and said, "Hope we see you again soon." "You just might," I said, tossing on my jacket. Outside, the air had cooled. The lake shimmered under a modest moon. No fanfare, no big soundtrack, just peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself with trumpets. The kind that arrives with steak, a window view, and no one to impress. I got in my truck, turned the key, and let the engine settle into its familiar rumble. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't heading home. I was already there.